Okay, let's get started. Thank you all for joining. Today we are joined by our special guest, CEO of CUDOS, Matt Hawkins. We're also joined by my co-host, Kudo Ollie, who many of you may know from our Coffee of Kudos calls here. He is our developer relations lead, and he will be joining us here and helping to get some great answers out of Matt today.
Hey team, yeah, thanks for having us on, Blockchain Jeff, and looking forward to this one with you, Matt.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well.
Okay, let's get started. So, Matt, as you guys may know, Matt is the CEO of Kudos, CEO and founder. But some of you this might be the first time you're speaking to Matt or hearing about Matt or hearing from Matt. So, Matt, if you could, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how Kudos came to be.
Yeah, everyone. Sure. So, I guess the background before this is we previously founded a data center and cloud company back in 2000, just as the internet was taking off. And we really provided kind of an early version of decentralized cloud or distributed cloud rather, where we were providing cloud capacity around the world. We were in about 55 data centers around the world. Essentially someone could come to our platform or our network. If they wanted diverse locations, diverse carriers, diverse buildings, facilities, we would provide that pretty much anywhere in the world that we had capacity. But we had to build all of that infrastructure. We built one of the data centers. We dug our own fiber. We built our own cloud platforms. So we kind of had the experience of building and running all of this. And we ended up being the largest data center aggregator in the UK. We provided a fair percentage of the UK's infrastructure. But while we were running that company, we were seeing all of this spare and available computing capacity in the network. I mean, even if you look at Amazon AWS, which is one of the most efficient cloud platforms in the world, they only run at 65% efficiency. So we were seeing up to 80, 90% spare capacity in this. As technology kind of progressed and that company was acquired in 2016, we realized we could take our knowledge and essentially build kind of a global compute network that would replicate what we physically had to build ourselves, but overcome all the barriers and pains that we had of having to own that infrastructure. So one of the challenges is always, as a cloud provider, is having to raise money, to keep building that infrastructure. Another pain is the spare capacity that kind of sits in your network, which means it's underutilized, but you've all had to pay for it all. And then you kind of, as a cloud or data center provider, you end up with a lot of hardware that you only keep your last one or two generations of infrastructure and servers running on your network, and then everything else. I mean, we used to call it an eBay room, but essentially it was a large storeroom, and pretty much most cloud providers are like this, where items just go into there and then they go off to IT recycling companies, or you never end up selling it and it ends up in storage. So if we can reactivate that, it means that that's substantially greener because we're using hardware that had kind of been offloaded and wasn't used for cloud anymore. So we could make it much more ecological, more sustainable, able to scale better. And as a cloud provider, you typically only sell to your markets. That might be a geography or a language market. And then if you are outside of that, you're kind of competing against the big hyperscalers. So it means that you don't get to be part of the large global cloud network that hyperscalers run, or edge networks where people are looking for kind of connectivity in those countries. So if we realize, if we can build a global marketplace that connects suppliers and buyers of global infrastructure, we overcome every single one of these problems that the industry experiences. We can make it more ecological, more sustainable. And also, if we can tokenize that infrastructure, which is what we've now been doing, we can enable the financing of that infrastructure to enable our cloud providers and whoever else provides infrastructure into the network to be able to finance it and to be able to scale. but democratizing that infrastructure further so that the public benefit, because they then have a yield and a product that they can generate a long-term sustainable yield. It's real yield. It's not made up printing tokens yield. It's a real revenue and a business model behind it. It means that the suppliers get to benefit and expand faster, and it means that the buyers of this tokenized infrastructure get to benefit because obviously they get to share in the returns of these providers. So what we've essentially been doing is building a network that overcomes all of these major issues in the industry, which is, that's why we've been doing this. I guess it's nearly coming on 5 years, because there's been a lot to build and overcome there. But that's essentially what we've done. And I guess if you look at the slightly different approach that we've probably taken to other infrastructure providers, one of them is, our background is selling to cloud providers and the Web 2 space. And the Web 2 space is a $80 billion plus market a year. And our network can, the CUDOS network, can directly service about 19 billion of that. So those customers are literally sat there waiting, ready to go. And they are just looking for something that's either more sustainable, more scalable, more economical, or provides them greater coverage, to have lower latency. So that's the problems that we've been overcoming for that industry. And that's our background. We sold into that industry for 15 years. So a lot of the customers that are now coming across to CUDOS that you'll see over the next few months, because for those that have kind of been keeping up to date on what we're doing, the compute network went live last month, the blockchain compute live. We'll cover these in the questions, but it goes live this week. It should be. Those are now in place, that we're now starting to get these original customers on board. But these are big customers, our biggest ones that we've now got MOUs for are signing up to kind of, they're spending currently up to about $250,000 per month on cloud. So these are the ones that we used to sell into. So that's really what we focused on. It's providing something more sustainable, where everyone can benefit in the revenue and the profits of the network, and we can really democratize infrastructure and make it more sustainable.
Nice. So there's a lot of experience there in terms of Web 2 cloud infrastructure, and I guess now we're building something that kind of serves both the Web 2 and the future of the web, which is Web 3, which we're working on now. So yeah, a lot of experience there, and super beneficial to us, I suppose. So I guess one of the main questions that we want to address on this space is why we chose the Cosmos ecosystem to be a part of. I mean, there's so many great chains out there, great ecosystems. Why was the decision made to, I guess, have CUDOS built within the Cosmos ecosystem?
There's a couple of considerations. One of them is to look at it as a technical consideration, as in what is technically the best platform to build with. Another one is kind of commercially, what is a well accepted platform across exchanges and dexes and other integrations that we need to do, and wallets that we can integrate into. So they were really the two key considerations. So from a technical perspective, we looked to, do we do this on a third-party chain? It could have just been an ERC20 smart contract solution. Could have run on Solana. It could have run on any of those. Obviously, on lower transaction networks like Ethereum, it has nowhere near the capacity that we need to be able to run this type of infrastructure. On the higher end networks, such as Solana, for example, if you kind of look from a technical level, what we need to do, we need to be able to run consensus across multiple devices to send out compute to multiple devices, pull those results back, and put them into smart contracts, either on our network, so people build, or the network that we're on, or other networks to support other networks. And ultimately, if we're going to do that, we also need to be able to scale on the number of transactions. So sort of when we get to the other questions, we'll show why that we will end up in the kind of thousands of transactions per second with some of the things that we've got coming on next year. And those networks, I mean, Solana really is sort of topping out at about 3,000 transactions a second. So running and building on a third-party network, it doesn't make sense because they won't be able to cope with the kind of growth that we've got. And you're seeing, issues, and you're then putting your the project itself kind of at risk of the reliability of those networks. So ultimately, it came down to, okay, we're going to have to build this essentially ourselves. What's the best way to do that? And we could have built our own chain. The other two options, which we considered were really only the viable options, were either running on Substrate, which naturally is the underlying tech for Polkadot, or Tendermint and Cosmos SDK, which is obviously what Cosmos and that community is built on. So we looked at when we looked at Substrate and the Tendermint platform, it was really coming down to one with scalability. Substrate does not scale anywhere near as well as the Cosmos SDK. So from a transactions per second, we can top out on the current configuration of about 1,000 transactions per second, theoretically. But we discussed kind of layer 2 solutions, which we can run on our network to get us up to about 3,000 transactions per second. And then we can do on Cosmos SDK the kind of equivalent of sharding on Ethereum, where we can create other chains, and they are additional zones essentially. But then these communicate with each other across IBC, which is the bridge protocol in the Cosmos network. So it enables us to really scale out at kind of between 1,000 to 3,000 transactions a second per time. And there pretty much is no other technology that we saw that could do that. I think that's purely from a transaction perspective. From a tooling perspective, then the ability to efficiently write Go code and be able to write the modules that we need to support infrastructure going forwards. Again, this is much better, both from an efficiency and a programmability perspective, to do it on the Tendermint Cosmos network. So really, it gave us the ability to scale much better. It gave us the ability to code and adapt as we wanted to. And then also the bridging technology is substantially superior. So we built our last company, the data center cloud company. We are a very large network provider as well. And if you look at how the internet works, the cloud providers or data center providers, network providers, they have an identity, and they're called an AS number. But really all it is a kind of, I guess the equivalent comparison is, think of it like a postcode. And if you want to go from one postcode to another, use a communication protocol called BGP. And that's how you transfer data from one network to another. And that's how the whole of the internet works. Now, IBC is built on virtually the same theory and method that the BGP network is done and the internet's built on. So it's far superior from a scalability perspective, where every chain eventually can communicate directly with every other chain and transfer assets and value between those chains. Now, IBC is still in a relatively early state compared to BGP, but the designs are exactly the same. So we know that method works to scale on an internet level scale of technology, and the other networks aren't designed to do that again. So it really kind of ticked all three boxes by far for us to be able to create a global scale network. And then the last element was just down to integrations, and pretty much all exchanges support the Cosmos SDK protocol, which means it's very easy for us to add and expand onto other exchanges around the world. And naturally, it's a global network, and we'll be adding exchanges in Africa and other regions that we're expanding. And then also from the tools that are around it, there's DEXs that are out there, there's wallets that are out there. It's based on Rust as well. Rust is more adaptable for some of the things that we want to do, but there's also modules to be able to support EVM going forward. So it's kind of, we looked at every single tick box and it won pretty much in all areas.
That sounds really cool. I mean, it sounds like the Cosmos ecosystem and what they built is really the foundation for the next level of the web. And what we're building is the next level of infrastructure for the web. So yeah, seems like a really good fit there. Yeah, perfect sort of synergy there. There's a lot of alignment. So yeah, I guess as part of this space, we asked you guys for some questions to ask Matt, and you guys came through. You came through with a lot of questions, a lot of great questions. I'm going to try and get through as many of them as we can, and then we'll open it up for you guys to ask questions directly on here. So feel free to request to be a speaker, and when we get to that stage of the space, I will be rising some of you up to ask your questions directly. But now we're going to get started with some of the questions you guys have put in via our various channels. And a lot of this is in regards to the tokens. So that's where the token side of things come into play. So I'll kick it off with this question. This question comes from Corey. Corey's asking, how will Kudos plan to make the structure on-chain compute solution, and how will it work with the token?
Okay, yeah, so I'll probably expand a little bit on that as well. From the compute perspective, like I mentioned, we see two main areas where people are going to consume compute. One is going to be your traditional Web2 customer who, this is what Netflix and Amazon and video streaming and game servers are all built on. And then in the Web3 space, it's metaverses, it's AI, it's video streaming, all of these infrastructure solutions that are needed there. So we enable consumption via the best two methods in those areas. So on the Web2 version, we've got a GUI, we've got an API, a graphical user interface. We've got an API. We accept standard methods like Terraform, which is how people scale compute on that side. And you can pretty much use it exactly the same way you would as DigitalOcean or Amazon. And it's designed to be extremely familiar and friendly. Most of those users aren't yet ready on how you need to connect a wallet, you need to consume resources from the blockchain perspective. So we sort of abstracted everything away so that kind of how they consume it is how they consume today. And that's why we are getting so much adoption compared to a lot of the other Web3 projects that are out there. We've got single customers spending 10 times what other whole blockchains are having consumed in compute, specifically because we've gone for that market. In the Web3 space, then that is where it's already in testnet. Actually, I don't know if anyone here has tried it already. So you can consume compute via the testnet, and I believe it's this week, if it's not been announced already, is that the compute side is going live from smart contract. So to start with, that means that you can scale, you can literally just connect on the smart contract. You can connect your wallet, put in the funds that you want to pay for in Kudos, and then you can just scale up and down. So it's an open marketplace. You can request what's available in what locations. Is it renewable energy? That it's running on. Is it GPUs or CPUs or running in these countries? And it's all available in that marketplace. At the moment, the first release is just running on our blockchain, but then we are adding the connectivity onto most other tier one chains so that you can consume, because it's great, if the whole platform is built on the Kudos network, but actually if it then gets built on Ethereum or Solana or Polkadot or any other of these chains, we want to be able to consume compute there. So at the moment, we're partnered with Algorand and Elrond as the first two, where we will be doing joint partnerships into their developer communities and enabling them to scale the computing resources on the Kudos network. And then we'll replicate that model with others. So you really just scale up and down virtual resources as needed. We also have a graphical interface which will be live before Christmas, I believe. And that kind of gives you a dApp that you can go on to. So for those that aren't necessarily as used to From a coding perspective, they can just go onto the DApp and choose what they want and deploy, connect their wallet and deploy compute. So that will be going live shortly. But pretty much every way that you would want to be able to consume compute is there.
Perfect. So next question comes from EJ. EJ is asking, how will transactions for computing power work when people choose to pay with fiat or other crypto assets? Will there be an exchange in the background so that the real transaction is paid in CUDOS? Would this benefit the utility of the CUDOS token much more?
Yeah, so we, on the Web 2 side, then, yeah, users can pay in fiat. We are integrating CUDOS on there as well, and we are integrating suppliers being paid in the CUDOS token. So you will see that our priority was to get it live and get the kind of big enterprise customers that spend large amounts of compute using it, and then integrating the payment method following that. So we've had the suppliers that have been signing up. On the Web3 side, it's end-to-end CUDOS. So the buyers buying CUDOS, the sellers of the network receiving CUDOS. So we've done it end-to-end. But yeah, ultimately, we want to bring value from your traditional Web2 space into the CUDOS token. So that will be exchanged into CUDOS. We are also releasing, as part of compute, is that you can pay with any other Cosmos SDK or Cosmos blockchain token. So if you want to pay with, your Osmo token or any of the other ones, you can go on. You can pay directly with that. On the back end, we just do a swap on the DEX and swap it into CUDOS, and then it's paid to the suppliers in CUDOS. So we're bringing kind of your other tokens from the other chains and value from your kind of fiat world into the network as part of it. I know a lot of this has been talking about compute, but it's probably worth talking about our tokenization as well. So a lot has been going on in the background around tokenization, but that isn't going live until Q1. So the blockchain is live, the compute network is live, blockchain compute is going live this week. So real utility is actually now just starting for the network and scaling up. The tokenized infrastructure is where we're enabling these service providers in different areas. So they can be a data center provider, they can be a storage provider, they can be a renewable energy mining farm. We're tokenizing the whole infrastructure, and then the owner of, and we're using an NFT because that's a good way to have a legal transferable contract that people can then trade publicly. That is enabling people to be able to earn in CUDOS for that. So that brings in a lot of utility as well for the token. So we should have by end of Jan about $100 million of infrastructure available in that network. We've kind of got our first order for about 2 million of infrastructure. It's just about to go through on that. And then users are incentivized to kind of get paid in CUDOS rather than getting paid in whatever the native earning is for that. So that will bring in substantial utility of our token over the next 6 months.
That's amazing because utility of the CUDOS token is a hot topic right now in our community. I think that a lot of people will be really excited to hear some of the developments that are on the way and already happening. So yeah, that's super exciting. So a lot of you have asked multiple questions, but I want as many people as possible to have at least one of their questions being asked. So I'm going to move on to DigiTrade's question. DigiTrade has asked how will the decentralized cloud computing network be able to accept fiat? I found out that you will have a centralized interface that accepts fiat for the decentralized services. What's the point of the token if you're a centralized company that accepts fiat? Yeah, so that is DigiTrade's question. I think, Matt, Could
Okay.
you? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, if we don't enable people to buy, if you're purely keeping the ability for people to buy resources in Kudos and people earning in Kudos, you're not bringing in directly, you're not bringing in any value from the outside world. So you're not bringing in value from other tokens, you're not bringing in value from the fiat world. If you're just using a cyclical system, it then just becomes down to people buying those tokens. Whereas if we open it up so that people can then pay in other tokens, if people can pay in fiat, you're bringing the value from outside of that area directly into the network. So that's why, and that's where you've seen a lot of failure, I would say, or not necessarily failure, but you've not seen the utilization of other platforms if they don't open it up to the wider the world. So it's a little bit like, I guess, a DEX is the equivalent of just keeping it within that token. But a centralized exchange is the equivalent of crossing between fiat and the crypto space. So the Web 2 market, which is, that is for us, that's for about 19 billion market that we can address. But the Web 3 space is, in order of hundreds of times smaller than that at the moment today. Over the next 5-10 years, they will start to balance out. But if you look at the size of these markets, all blockchains need validators and need infrastructure, all metaverses need validators and need infrastructure. But the amount and size of that network compared to your Web 2 space is minuscule at the moment, but will scale substantially faster. So we have to make it in a way that this Web 2 space will consume resources, and because we've sold to that market for so long, we know exactly how they need to consume, exactly how they need to buy, and exactly how they need to manage their resources. So we have to design it the way that market works. If you don't, you just won't get adoption, which is what you've seen with other chains. They might have some brilliant tech, but if you don't build it the way the world uses it, it won't get used. So we have to build it for both sides. But ultimately, we're bringing the value because the suppliers are, the mining farms, the providers are getting paid in the token.
That makes a lot of sense, and I suppose that allows us to lean into our strengths on the, with all the experience on the Web 2 side of things. So yeah, thanks for answering that, Matt. On to the next question from Bear Moon. Bear Moon has asked, are there further business partnership integrations to unfold next year from AMD, Sony, Nvidia, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll probably cover a couple of the questions on that one as well, because there's another question about AMD. So the AMD partnership is across a few different areas. One is we're working together to make better utilization of their hardware. One of the bits that we've been working with AMD is at the moment, the current release that we've just done for compute is using available computing resources, and you can scale up and down on those resources. And we've kind of been putting everything in place to make that journey as easy as possible for the buyers to be able to do it exactly the same way, we talked about that they need to consume today. And we've made the supplier journey much easier. And kind of the last probably 2 months has been getting the UI right, getting the flows right, and getting the ability to scale much better on that side. One of the things that AMD want to do is to be able to enable our network to be used for their large enterprise buyers of their chips to be able to sell resources to each other. So that will be in place once we have confidential compute in place. So for AMD, that's called AMD SDB. And that will enable much larger clients to be able to increase their ROI, but also be able to expand their utilization or purchases of their chips as well. So we've already had calls with their sales teams on how this will be done. And then once we have confidential compute in place next year, then we'll look to expand on that piece. So Sony, the PlayStation side is longer, and we're working. We although we've released, I guess you'd call it a kind of a proof of concept for compute from a user desktop perspective, because ultimately we want to be able to use compute on home machines, PCs, PlayStations, and that's what Kudo Miner was kind of a proof of concept from that perspective. We a lot of our utilization and focus has been around the enterprise customers, so that we can provide full scalable infrastructure. The advantage there is, they're kind of the pipeline that we've got is very large, which means the value to people in the network, on and token holders is very large as well. So we focused on those first. But ultimately, we want to be getting this working on PlayStation next year, and the other consumer devices that we're working on, and with the Tingo, partnership, which I think isn't noted on here. Tingo partnership has been in the works for probably 12 to 18 months now, and this is where we're going to be integrating with their 20 million mobile phone users. We're actually going to be integrating our tokenized infrastructure with those, but also the plan is we're basically working together to bring in education, energy, and internet across Africa, without going into the details because I'm not sure how much is public at the moment. But that's what we'll be doing next year, and all of that's going to be running on the CUDOS network. So that's going to be very good, and then we can replicate that in other regions across Africa. And we've got a great community in Africa as well. So we're looking to grow on that side. I think NVIDIA, we did the announcement that we're working together with them. I mean, the advantage for them is that we can bring in additional computing capacity where they don't have enough capacity to be able to scale for their users that want to test their platforms. And that's typically the model that we're working with many of our partnerships. We've got partners that they have certain amounts of infrastructure, but they can't scale beyond that, which is the whole idea of our network, is to be able to scale infrastructure for anyone that wants to consume it, but also for other cloud providers, we can scale their infrastructure while they're still building out. I think any of the others, we probably going to have to wait till we announce them to be able to say the names.
Yeah, that's all exciting stuff. It looks like next year is going to be super exciting. A lot of things unfolding and coming into fruition, or just getting started next year. So yeah, that's super exciting stuff. So next question comes from Frankie L. Frankie L asks, does CUDOS have the key management cluster similar to AWS? I think that would be a great tool going forward. This is relevant because a lot of wallet management companies use AWS to store users' private keys. It would be awesome if CUDOS had a similar service so that we could move away from AWS and more towards decentralized solutions to the key management problem.
That is a good question. At the moment, we don't have a plan to offer that as a service, but what we love is things like this where we're getting feedback from the community. So if that gets voted in as one of the high priority features that there's demand for, then great. We'll work with the roadmap and get that added. So feedback like that is brilliant. Currently no plan on that item, but I agree. I think it's good demand. I think if we look from a utilization perspective at the moment, the usage of providers on the network has been kind of HPC, because a lot of our service providers and the suppliers on the network have been large data center cloud providers, and they are providing kind of thousands of cores and thousands of GPUs. So it's typically AI, video rendering, data analysis, these types of compute workloads. And then next quarter is a lot more edge. And that's where it's metaverses, games platforms are scaling out on the network, blockchains. And then following that, kind of we are open to, what does the community want and what do we see demand on that. So really good point on that.
Yeah, that was a great question, Frankie. If you're in here, if not, you'll probably be listening to this back at a later time as this is being recorded. Great question. Next question is from Bear Moon again. Thanks for all the questions, Bear Moon. What is the team most excited about for the project in the first quarter of the next year? Tokenized infrastructure, scaling of compute, and challenges.
I think it's just those two that you mentioned, actually. The two, compute, like I mentioned last month, went live. That is now at the point, because we've got the larger suppliers coming on board, that's at the point in early Q1 that's going to be scaling very quickly. So that's great because that's been years in development, and we're now seeing the adoption and onboarding of that. I think the other part from compute is going to be the edge computing, where this is where we've got quite a large number of metaverses waiting for the edge element to go live, and then they're going to start deploying on it. So you'll start to see quite a lot of metaverses running on the CUDOS network, which would be great, and we're all excited about that. And then I think the final bit is the tokenized infrastructure, because that is, that's a huge market. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market. We've got a lot of demand, and we'll also, being able to provide real yield into users where they're generating, a good, solid, reliable yield off their tokens. You'll be able to swap your CUDOS tokens into infrastructure, but also, enabling it to be paid by other tokens. Like I mentioned, it brings in value from other networks into our network. So those are the three that we're just really busy. The whole team is on getting those out and getting those scaled over the next quarter, because they're all the full, real, scalable utilities that we've been working towards.
This leads nicely into the next question from EJ again, who's asked a few questions. Thanks, EJ. How many CUDOS employees are currently working on blockchain-related stuff?
So there's just over 50 in the team, and the majority, I would probably pair, if you paired compute, because compute is ultimately integrated with blockchain, and tokenization is ultimately integrated into blockchain, then the entire business is running and working towards that. So the blockchain in itself gives us the ability to extend, our network into other networks, gives the decentralization and distribution of the compute workloads, but also enables the tokenization as well. But all of it, although these are, I guess, from a consumption perspective, they're different verticals, they're all relying and intertwined very tightly into each other to use that same infrastructure. So everybody is purely dedicated towards all of it, really. It's hard to separate them out, but if you wanted to say purely on the, I think purely on the blockchain, it's probably, if you took resources in the business, we're probably evenly split across those three in people's time.
Nice.
Plus, I was just saying, plus externally, as these things go live, we really want the community to get involved and be building on these as well.
And we've already started to see some of that with some of the new projects joining our foundation, and some of our community members are dev rangers as well who've been contributing. So yeah, it's not just the team working on the blockchain side of things, it's all of you guys as well, and we really appreciate that. So again, next question is from Ulfi. Ulfi has asked, it's nearly a year and a half ago since CUDOS partnered with Accubits. How is this evolving? Has it generated something you can share?
Sure. So on the Accubits side, one of the main areas, because Accubits do a lot in AI, and one of the main areas that really excited them was the ability to take a lot of the projects that they currently work with, and they don't just do blockchain. They're a mixture of blockchain, AI, blockchain and AI, and merging these together. Was to be able to take what they currently have to put in Amazon today, to be able to then run it directly from our chain and scale out from our chain. So now that the blockchain compute is going live within a few days, we can then start to scale up, and they'll start to migrate some of their projects that they were working on onto us and build on us going forwards. So the partnership's been there ready, but actually a fair bit of it has been waiting on blockchain compute to go live, which we're now at. The same goes with quite a lot of other development companies. Is that is the real USP, I guess. One can be from a layer one perspective, we've got the full features of other layer ones and being able to build in Rust. The USPs, I guess, are around native NFT support, which means you don't have to build the smart contracts. But part of what we need to do is to bring in that community and utilization around it. So we've got bridge providers integrating into our network, into the CUDOS network. We've got DEXs coming onto the CUDOS network. We kind of got all those other elements that you need around it for people to start building on there. But if you think, the blockchain element actually only went live a few months ago, so we've been busy kind of building those relationships over the last 2 years, kind of getting everything ready so that you'll then start to see a lot of adoption next year.
Some more exciting things coming next year then. Next year's like seeming like it's going to be a great year for us. Yeah, super exciting. Next question comes from Shu. Shu has asked, have we had anyone from Render Network talk with CUDOS? I think they are partners or somehow connected, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so we were speaking with the Render team a while back, actually. And again, that needed compute and blockchain compute to be in place. So now these are in, it's a good time for us probably to go back and have that conversation. But they need to naturally scale GPUs on their side. They've been having some good adoption from a technology perspective and also from a client perspective on utilization of this network. So it's probably, now that these are live, it's a good time for us to go back and have that conversation.
Next question, because I'm trying to move through these as time is ticking on, and I want to have some time for you guys to ask some questions directly. So I'm going to try and move through these as quickly as possible. Next question comes from Pepe Frog rubbing his hands. Great name. Are there any plans for a buyback or burn for the token?
I do think that's the most entertaining name I've had. Yeah, so we are adding buyback in. That is part of also where the revenue is generated from the Web2 space. So where commissions are made, because essentially you think of our network as an infrastructure network between suppliers and buyers, really. And that's where the commission's made, whether it's compute, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's renewable energy mining farms. That's what the network does. And we are taking a portion of that, and we're just finalizing this with some other token economics providers to get it right. And then we'll put it out to the community. To put that into buyback, and then that buyback is going to go into a liquidity pool. And the reason we need it to go into a liquidity pool is, one is we keep the value in the network. If you're just burning it, you're not necessarily creating value. If we put it into a liquidity pool, that strengthens the liquidity between us and, let's say, Bitcoin, whatever the pair is. And because we're releasing the tokenized infrastructure, let's say to start with, we'll have about, like I mentioned, $100 million of mining farm infrastructure. The renewable side is the first one that's going live. If 100% of those buyers chose to get paid in CUDOS, that's $100 million essentially of token buying that needs to be done in CUDOS token. So we need the liquidity to be there. And then each year that pays out again about $100 million. So, and this is going to scale. This is just where we're starting. So we really need that token liquidity to be in place between these pairs because of all this utility that's coming into the network. And one of the best ways to do that is essentially for us to take these commissions and use those to buy that back into the market, because then we're essentially bringing the value twice into the network.
Great. Next question comes from Bear Moon again. So this is more of a compute-related question, but interesting. And also, I'd like to remind everyone, if you'd like to rise up and ask a question, please start putting in your requests, and I will accept them once we get into the direct question section of this space. But yeah, next question. So for Kudo Compute, so the first question is, how does the project make money off Kudo Compute, and does the supplier set the cost? Does the supplier set the cost rate, or does the CUDO compute platform set the market rate for the computing use?
Yeah, okay. I'll answer the second question first and then the other one. So the suppliers set their price. You know, this is an open market, so you have to let suppliers set their own price. Also, economics in the world are extremely different. So the cost of electricity in Europe versus Asia, for example, is 10 times less. The cost of electricity, if I use northern Norway, for example, versus France or versus the USA, is 10 times less. The cost of hardware, depending on where you are, is completely different in different parts of the world as well. So economics in the different parts of the world are completely different in different facets of computing. So we have to be an open network where everybody can set their own pricing. And then companies, you know, have their own hardware allocations or cost allocations to hardware as well. So it has to be an open network. You can't let a network choose the price. It doesn't let people take advantage of the different economics of the world. And you know, a supplier may want to make 20%, another supplier may only want to make 100% on their infrastructure. So it's totally open. And that doesn't matter what it is. If it's renewable energy mining farms, they're all setting their own price. If it's infrastructure tokenized, you know, cloud platforms, they're setting their price. If it's consuming distributed compute, they're all setting their own price. So it has to be an open market. And then what we do is, as a network, is essentially there's commissions, you know, fees that are between supply and demand. If it's compute, the fees are 30% between the supply and demand. If it is tokenized infrastructure, the fees are 10% between supply and demand. And then if users want to get less fees for that, they will be able to stake the CUDOS token and to be able to receive less fees on running on that network. But that's how it's designed.
I haven't seen many requests come through yet, so I'm going to keep going through the questions you guys have sent in. The next question is from Shu. He's asking, when's the next Kudos cast? I think I can kind of take this one. I think so with Kudos Cast, you guys, some of you might be familiar with it. It was our podcast that we would host with our VP of Partnerships, Pete Hill, and our partners. And we just go over how we're working together, what sort of technology they're working on, and they go into detail on what they're working on and how we're going to work together, essentially. These were amazing. A lot of you were massive fans of this. We are releasing another episode quite soon with one of our developer ambassadors out in Nigeria. But yeah, as of next year, we'll probably be rethinking the format behind Kudos Cast, but you will see it again. But yeah, I've seen now Charles has requested to ask a question, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask your question, Charles. Here we go. Should have the ability to ask your question. Charles?
Hey, Jeff.
Hey.
Hey, Matt.
Hi.
It was great to be on here as a speaker. Yeah, I could wanted to just ask a question regarding, Kudos onboarding, Web3 users onto this Web3 form of cloud computing. And of course, we know that Web2, we're really ingrained in, the Web2 system, as people are heavily dependent on, Web2 computing suppliers. We have it today, Google platform, and of course, Amazon Web Services. It's basically tantamount to how we are dependent on Web2 social media platform, just like the one we're using now. And my question is, what is CUDOS plan in terms of marketing or any other associated strategies to basically onboard, Web2 users onto Web3, which is actually CUDOS in this case. And what's the strategy to that? And definitely, I'm going to ask another question, which is, do we have the capacity to, onboard and serve the persons, the bulk of the persons in which we onboard onto CUDOS? Yeah, so that's my question.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Charles. So the strategy to start with on onboarding the Web2 customers has, it's kind of, to them, it's a little bit irrelevant that we're onboarding them onto Web3 from the consumption perspective, because we're trying to abstract that away to get rid of those barriers to entry. So, that is the team's background is the Web2 space. So that, as well as Web3, but they have a lot of contacts in that space. So kind of the guy that heads up the compute sales was previously heading up post-production video sales in Amazon, for example. We've got others which have contacts in the other spaces. So we've been going out to, and our last company, C4L, we used to sell into the video industry, post-production industry. So we've been going out to those providers, and they've been, I guess, the first ones that have been coming on board, and they're the large spenders. We've got some of them that are coming on which are spending kind of $250,000 a month on, with their hyperscale providers. So we've been doing, I guess, hand holding to answer your question about scalability. We've been hand holding these first customers as we're just making that journey as easy as possible, automating everything as much as possible. And we're in a pretty good place that we can now onboard as of end of this month. We're now in a good place that we can start to onboard those customers, and they're kind of fully self-service. The aim is, by December, is that it's totally self-service. I mean, at the moment, if someone wants to go on, they can go onto the platform, they can sign up, they can put in their, whatever they're using to pay, and they can start using the platform in seconds. There is no involvement from any of us or any of the team. But the large clients kind of need some support and help and hand holding, especially as we've been optimizing documentation, we've been making everything as kind of easy and as simple as possible. So from smaller users' perspective, who I would consider a smaller user, kind of someone or buyer, is someone that spends probably less than $1,000 a month on cloud. That is just automated. They can completely do everything themselves. We don't need to get involved. They can go onto our channels, and the ambassadors and the community there are able to support anything that they need, which means you can just scale globally. We've been busy working with larger suppliers of infrastructure so that the network itself will compete with the scale and the demand that's coming on board. But from a buyer's perspective, everything's just automated end to end. Same straight Web3, you just go through the documentation, consume, you connect your wallet and just consume as you need to. So that kind of fixes it from a scale perspective and from an onboarding perspective. I forgot your second part of the question. Sorry, you could just repeat that bit. Charles, you able to ask that one?
Charles? Perhaps he's having a connection issue there.
Okay.
We'll give you another chance, Charles. But actually, we're coming down to the last couple of minutes. So there is one question that was asked. Oh, we're getting some more people requesting. Bear Moon, okay. Let's give Bear Moon a chance to ask his question. Hey, Bear Moon. Hello, Ben.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Clear.
Hey.
All right. Hey, how's it going? Jeff, Ali, Matt, great podcast. I have more of a question pertaining to the CUDO compute side. So my technical question is from a supply configuration side, me setting up, let's say me being a supplier. Would I be required to have a router specifically that supports port forwarding that would need a range of ports enabled from just my network side and the firewall side? And would I also need a domain as well from like me acquiring one from GoDaddy?
Got you. Yeah, so at the moment, the technical requirements are dedicated hardware where the operating system can be installed on the host. They are currently need a public IP address. Typically, we're saying 8 public IP addresses per device. That will change in the future, where we'll be able to support NAT, so local translation of IP addresses. But at the moment, if you want to add on to the network, then it will need to be public IP addresses that we've got on there and dedicated hardware. We are building out the ability to scale directly into current virtualization solutions rather than it just being dedicated hardware. So we will soon be able to support virtual environments, which means, let's say you were running Hyper-V or VMware or OpenStack, you'll be able to run that on, you'll be able to run the CUDOS software on that spare capacity, and it will be able to monetize that capacity. But at the moment, it's dedicated hardware and it's public IP addresses. So if it's large environments, we will be able to support routing those, tunneling those IP addresses down to the end host. But the current version is designed really to be in public cloud data center environments. The next version will be to run on current cloud platforms, so scale out, and then we'll be able to support more types of homeware, like more types of devices like you just mentioned, because that's kind of then the next step to being able to run on home PCs or PlayStation.
Hope that clears things up for you, Bermu. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
So we've come to the end of this space. I'd like to thank all of you for your great questions. Thanks to Charles and Bear Moon for your questions directly to Matt, and all of you who sent in your questions. Thanks to all of you who joined and listened and took part in this space. And of course, we'd like to thank Matt for asking all these questions. Really, really helpful for the community to hear from you directly and have these questions answered. I'm sure a lot of them were excited to hear from you, and a lot of people are going to listen back to this recording as well, and it's going to be well received.
Yeah, and also just to add, thanks to the community for all the support. It makes all the difference. We've been, the community and the team internally have been incredibly busy, obviously, for the last few years, getting this to where it's got to the moment. But now the blockchain's live, compute network's live, blockchain compute's live this week, and tokenization is kind of around the corner. We're at that point that we're now pretty much ready to scale across all these applications and markets. So just thanks for everyone's support. We're in this together. We are building something pretty amazing, and we want everyone to benefit from it. So thanks.
Nice. Thanks, guys. And for all of you whose questions I didn't get round to answering, we will be hosting more spaces down the line. Our next space will be with our foundation lead, Dario Barra, and we'll be hearing from some of you guys on some of the ideas you guys will be pitching to the foundation, and be talking about what the foundation has been up to and the projects we've offered grants to so far, and what the plans are down the line. So that should be exciting, and you'll be hearing from more members of the team moving forward as well. As always, thanks for the support. Thanks for joining us, Thanks for being a part of our community. I always say the community is the heartbeat of the project. So, yeah, thanks, guys, and we'll speak with you soon.
Thanks for this one. Yeah, it's been a really good session. Thanks, team.